Hi everyone, my name is Clement Shlambe from Clement Shlambe Medical Tutorials, and welcome to our third lecture and the series of forensic pathology. And our third lecture is still on the introduction to medical legal casework, but in this lecture we're going to focus on one of the most exciting topics in forensic pathology, which is the cause, mechanism, and also the manner of death. Okay, so we are going to start with discussing the cause of death. But before we discuss that, you need to note that the two most common functions of the medical examiner's office or the coroner's office is determining the cause, the manner, and also the mechanism of death. But clinicians, lawyers, and also the lay public often have difficulty understanding the differences between the cause of death, the mechanism of death, and also the manner of death. Simply put, therefore, the cause of death is just any injury or disease that produces a physiological derangement in the body that results in the death of the individual. Okay, so this is just the definition of the cause of death. Now, although this differs widely, the following are the causes of death. Okay, a gunshot wound to the head, we categorize that as the cause of death. A stab wound to the chest, this is the cause of death. Adenocarcinoma of the lung is the cause of death. And coronary arteriosclerosis, this is the cause of death. So these are just examples of the causes of death, even if they differ widely. Now, let's talk of the mechanism of death. So the mechanism of death is the physiological derangement produced by the cause of death that results in the death. Okay, so here are the keywords, right? Look at this. The mechanism of death is the physiological derangement. Where is the physiological derangement coming from? It is being produced by the cause of death. And that cause of death eventually results, or obviously results in death. So that is the mechanism of death. Okay, so examples of mechanism of death would be hemorrhage, number one. It can be septicemia, and thirdly it can be cardiac arrhythmia. So this is the mechanism of death. Hope you are trying to differentiate between the cause of death and the mechanism of death as of this slide that we are just discussing. So a particular mechanism of death can be produced by multiple causes of death and vice versa. So if an individual dies of massive hemorrhage, it can be produced by a gunshot wound, a stab wound, or a malignant tumor of the lung, can erode into a blood vessel, and so forth. Okay? The reverse of this is that a cause of death, for example, a gunshot wound of the abdomen, can result in many possible mechanisms of death, such as, let's say, hemorrhage or peritonitis. So this is actually the mechanism of death. So what medical examiners do most of the time is that they review the death certificates which are produced by the clinicians, and not infrequently the cause of death is listed as cardiac arrest or cardiopulmonary arrest. This means that the heart stopped or the heart and lungs stopped. Okay, this is just an example. And then experience actually of the forensic pathologists tell them that when an individual dies, the heart and lungs stop. Okay, now these are not causes of death, and to a degree are not even mechanisms of death. And yet clinicians up to this day, maybe they continue to list these diagnoses on the death certificate, and also some government organizations will still accept them as the causes of death. So yeah, someone died because the heart stopped. It's not really any mechanism of death or the cause of death, not really. Okay, so the manner of death now, which is the last part of this lecture. So the manner of death explains how the cause of death came about. Okay, manners of death can generally be categorized as what? A is natural death. It can be homicide. It can be suicide, accident, and then it can be undetermined. Okay, so this is actually the manner of death. Others, and you need to note that a cause of death can have multiple manners, isn't it? Okay, this is what I wanted to say, but thank God it's on the next slide. A cause of death can have multiple manners. So let's get, for example, this one. An individual can actually die of massive hemorrhage, which is the mechanism of death, due to a gunshot wound to the heart, which is the cause of death, with the manner of death being homicide, suicide, accident, or undetermined. So one of these. So I think this example has best explained all the three important things that we've talked about in this lecture, which is the cause of death, the mechanism of death, and also the manner of death. So this statement here, you need to understand it. It would help a lot to differentiate between the mechanism of death, the cause of death, and also the manner of death. Okay. So the manner of death sometimes is determined, not all the time, but every time, or usually determined by the forensic pathologist, is just an opinion based on the known facts concerning the circumstances leading up to and surrounding a death, in conjunction with the findings at autopsy and also the laboratory tests. That's what we need to know. But we also need to realize that the autopsy findings may contradict or agree with the account of how the death occurred. So if the story of an individual is that an individual shot himself, and the autopsy reveals that, let's say, a gunshot wound to the back inflicted from a distance, obviously that account is incorrect. Okay. Now, if let's say it is a contact gunshot or wound of the temple, then the autopsy findings are consistent with the account, then it must be realized that the manner of death can be changed. That is one thing that we also need to realize. So if an individual is found with a contact gunshot wound to the temple, then no weapons present, no history of any suicidal threats, one might then conclude that this case is a homicide. But if it turns out that the individual had embezzled $500,000 from his company and was about to be indicated by the grand jury, and his body was found by his wife, who removed a gun and suicide note from the scene, then the cause of death would be changed to suicide. Okay, so that's what we need to understand. But when is the manner of death ruled undetermined? A manner of death is ruled undetermined when there is, one, insufficient information about the circumstances surrounding the death to make a ruling, or in some instances, when the cause of death is unknown. This one is the most common one. When the cause of death is unknown, this is undetermined. Okay. Now, in some instances, based on the circumstances surrounding a death also, a ruling to a manner of death can be made without a cause of death. There is no cause of death. And some forensic pathologists use the term unclassified. This is the term that most forensic pathologists use when they are dealing with a manner of death that can be made without a cause of death. So this refers to a death in which, unclassified actually refers to a death in which the cause and circumstances are known, of course, but the death itself does not readily fall into any of the aforementioned categories that we did mention. Okay. Okay. So this is all about the cause, the manner, and also the mechanism of death. And just to give an example under the manner of death, as we are concluding, because the slide is really showing a thank you already, a manner of death would give an example of an individual was found with a head injury, and obviously that head injury was due to a fall on the back of the head. And how do we conclude about that? Of course, let's say there was a suspicion, however, that the individual had been in a fight, okay? And the toxicological analysis revealed that the deceased was intoxicated. Was there a fight and the individual struck, fell backward and hit with his head, making the case a homicide? Or was there a fight in which the individual was not injured, walked away, and while intoxicated, they fell backward, striking their head, making the death an accident? So these are some of the questions that, as a forensic pathologist, you need to, and if medical legal investigative systems used to put in place, especially when they're dealing with these cases. Yeah. So it's very important to understand the three categories: the cause, the mechanism, and manner of death. This is where we end today and for now. And therefore, I invite you that you subscribe, like, and comment. And I would love to see you in the next lecture. Thank you for listening.